The Russians have used precision weaponry to destroy shopping malls, apartment buildings, pediatric hospitals, thermal power plants, hydroelectric power plant turbine halls, and district heating facilities, but so far they have not touched the natural gas infrastructure. I don't know why this is. I don't know whether they're unable to damage it or if they don't want to damage it. But either way, the result is that mains gas is flowing in Ukraine in most areas, while district heating facilities may go offline at any point. And if we expect this to continue to be the case throughout the winter, we need to consider the option of replacing district heating with gas. But I'm actually going to leave gas for the second half of the video, and I'm gonna talk about oil first, because oil and gas are basically brothers. So hello YouTube, I'm Michael Size, and oil is the best of both worlds. It's nearly as easy to transport as solid fuels, while also being nearly as easy to burn as gaseous fuels, and it's this combination of properties that makes oil the most sought after fossil fuel. So how do you make heat from oil? Well, it's easy. You can buy these made in China oil heaters for just over $100. I believe they're based on a German design whose patent protection expired, and from what I hear, they're super reliable. They have an air intake, a burn chamber, which is also the radiator, an exhaust pipe, a computer that controls everything, and a fan that passes air over the burn chamber to make the hot air and pump it around. They run off of 12 or 24 volts, and they can burn a variety of fuels. So what fuels can you burn, and how does each fuel behave? Well, the cleanest fuel to burn is kerosene. If you want to minimize pollution and maximize the lifespan of the device itself, you want to burn kerosene. I don't think there's any catch to it, and it's not even terribly expensive. The next fuel is diesel, and this comes in two forms. First of all, you can obviously get diesel at the gas station, but that diesel is heavily taxed because it's intended to go into road vehicles and thus charges some embedded road taxes. It works like this in most of the world, and I'm pretty sure that it works like this in Ukraine as well. But secondly, you have what's known as red diesel, and this is just regular diesel with a red colorant added in, which doesn't incur road taxes. And the idea is that if they find red diesel in your vehicle, you're gonna get a huge fine, but this is intended for off-road activity like tractors and chainsaws and generators, and of course oil heaters. So diesel and kerosene are the intended fuels, so to speak, but the list continues because there is a bunch more crap that you can burn in these, starting with a fossil fuel product which is confusingly known as fuel oil. I'm not actually sure if you can buy this stuff anymore, but it's a grade between diesel and bunker fuel. It's more viscous than diesel, it's usually high in sulfur, just because they didn't bother to remove the sulfur, and the only thing that it's really good for in a household is heating. If you can get it, it may be cheaper, although it will also generate more local air pollution. And the final fuel is waste oil, both used motor oil as well as used cooking oil. These are a bit complicated, especially the cooking oil, and there are two factors that make them complicated. First of all is the chunks. Whether it's steel shavings or burnt bits of potato chip, this will clog your burner almost instantaneously, so if you're gonna burn waste oil, you must filter it, and that may not be easy. Oil does not readily flow through a paper filter. I mean, it does, but it's like a liter per day or half a liter. And the only practical option I know of to speed a paper filter is to heat up the oil. Another option might be to use a textile filter instead of paper, such as denim perhaps, and I heard that this works well, but I haven't tried it personally. So chunks are problem number one, but problem number two is that these oils just do not burn that well, especially the cooking oil. It's not just the viscosity, although the viscosity is an issue, it's that cooking oil is made of triglycerides in comparison to diesel, which is basically as if you just had the fatty chains, free of the glycerin in the middle, and the glycerin is what impedes combustion as far as I understand it, and the huge size of the molecules isn't helping either. In fact, the process of producing biodiesel actually consists primarily of two steps, which are first breaking the fatty acids of the triglyceride, thus reducing the size of the molecule, and later removing the glycerin from the mixture. And again, this whole thing has to be done because triglycerides themselves do not burn as well. So to my knowledge, these oil heaters can never burn cooking oil cleanly, no matter how hot they get and no matter how much you mess with the settings. It will always generate smoke and it will always cover the internals in oil deposits, but there is a solution. Other than literally manufacturing biodiesel, the quick solution is to simply mix in some kerosene. Now I would expect it to work with as little as 10% kerosene, but it will definitely work at 30%, and in fact, the simple trick works so well that I even know people who have put this mixture of cooking oil and kerosene in a vehicle and it worked. It successfully ran an actual engine, so it's not surprising that it would work in a much more forgiving oil heater. And the last thing I'm going to say regarding the cooking oil is that you're allowed to burn new oil. It doesn't have to be waste oil. If you go to the store and you see oil selling for cheaper than diesel or kerosene, absolutely go for it. I mean, you're trying to keep your family warm, you're trying to make it through a literal war here. I know it feels wrong to burn food, many people are going to feel weird about it, but you shouldn't. So there's the story about the fuels. Now a bit more advice about the equipment itself, starting off with how should we install it. The device has 4 holes: an intake for combustion air, an output for flue gases, an intake for cold air, as in air which is going to be heated, and an output for the heated air. And there are really only 2 strict rules. The exhaust gases must go outdoors and the heated air must go indoors, but other than this, you have options. You can place it wherever you want and duct them however you want, but I'm going to tell you what the most efficient setup is because I believe that it's easily achievable DIY and I don't believe that you have to do any real compromises to get it, so you might as well go for maximum efficiency, so here we go. I would install the heater indoors, mounted on a wall, and that's because I want the radiative heat from the device itself to remain indoors. Now I would drill 1 hole through the wall close to the burner for the combustion air, which would come straight from the outside and not from the living space, and I would obviously duct this into the air intake, and then I would drill a 2nd hole through the wall for the exhaust. Now I would drill this 2nd hole as far as possible so that the exhaust pipe runs indoors for as long as possible, although I would not use a pipe that's longer than the one which the manufacturer supplied, because there may be a maximum length. So I would stretch it as far as possible but no further, and I would also slightly slope it in case any condensation wants to form on the inside. And the idea here is just that the exhaust is still quite hot and I want it to radiate heat inside the living space, and in fact, if I'm supplying the power for the burner from a 12 volt power source already, I would also grab a few 12 volt PC fans and make them blow over the exhaust pipe to maximize heat recovery. And by the way, if you're extra savvy, you could also duct the hot air all over the apartment into every room to heat all the rooms. Although you might want to upgrade to a thicker air duct if you're gonna do that, since the fan inside the device only has so much power. And that's about it. Almost as easy to transport as wood, but almost as easy to burn as gas. That's the beauty of oil heating. Now let's move on to actual gas. In former communist Europe, many neighborhoods of apartments were built which used district heating as the heating solution, and they were poorly thought out, and after 1990, once the subsidies ran out, many of these district heating networks slowly went bankrupt. At the same time, many do remain operational, and especially so in Ukraine, and these make soft targets for Russian terrorist attacks. Now, when these networks do close down, the most common solution, including in Ukraine as far as I can tell, has been to install high-capacity natural gas pipes inside the apartment buildings, and then these gas pipes enable every owner to install a combi boiler in their own unit. Combi boilers are a bit of a miracle technology. They can be as cheap as $500, they're easily as powerful as 30 kilowatts, they can make domestic hot water at the same time as they can make hot water for the hydronic system, they're quick to install, they're self-contained, and because gas burns so cleanly, they don't need a giant flue pipe, they just have a small stub sticking out of the wall. And this doubles as the air intake because it's made with two concentric pipes. They can turn on and off on a dime, and they can modulate across a fairly wide power range, usually between 10 and 30 kilowatts. They're manufactured all over Europe, and I'm fairly certain that there are manufacturers in Ukraine as well, so installing these on a large scale shouldn't be an issue, and in fact I would say that installing the gas infrastructure might actually be the bigger issue. But Ukrainians find themselves in a bit of a weird position here. See, the district network still works, and replacing it with individual boilers would boost resiliency of course, but they would also be kind of a waste of money. At the same time, waiting until the district heating does get bombed and rushing to install everything in the dead of winter is a risky strategy, and furthermore, both strategies are risky because while mains gas is flowing right now, as I mentioned in the beginning, we don't know whether that may stop in the future as well. So it would be extra sucky if you closed a perfectly working network, spent the money on individual boilers, and then were left with no heating anyway. And that's why I left this for the second half of the video, because it's a bit weird. It's not like the other solutions I talked about. Everything else was off-grid and this one is on-grid. So this one's not as resilient, and in addition, it cannot be done unilaterally. The whole neighborhood has to agree, or at least the whole building. But what if you could take these boilers off-grid? Well, it turns out that you actually can. These combi boilers can be tuned to run off of LPG, although this works a lot better in a house because you can just park the tank in the yard. But if you're willing to haul the fuel up the stairs, it can be done in apartments as well. The way you do this is that you'd retrofit the boiler to the existing hydronic loops, and you would install two sets of valves that can selectively isolate either your boiler or the district heating network. And this doesn't have to be fancy, just literal manual valves. So in terms of actually supplying heat, a setup like this would work and probably work pretty well. But I will say that you might have some trouble with getting billed correctly, because if you have something like calorimeters for billing, these devices are going to bill you anytime that the radiators are hotter than the air, because they have no way to tell where the heat is coming from. So you can go autarkic with a combi boiler in terms of your gas supply, but you mustn't forget about the electricity supply, because most of these heating solutions do not work without a bit of electricity. So I'll take this opportunity to talk about uninterruptible power supplies, or UPS. I personally own this model because it was the cheapest option in the store. It can provide 300 watts of power, which is well above the 100 watts that boilers tend to require, and this has to be paired with an external 12-volt battery to actually store the electricity. Now, I use a car battery, but you shouldn't, and here's why. Car batteries do not do well under deep cycling. If you're actually going to discharge the battery daily, a car battery will be dead in about 50 to 100 days, because they're intended for surge current. They spin up the engine and then immediately get recharged again. That's what they're made for. Now this works for me because the only reason why I have this UPS at all is just in case the electricity goes out while I have a fire already burning inside my wood boiler, which cannot turn off on a dime. So the battery will only get discharged in an emergency, and I have not had any power outages for 2 years, so no discharge. Now in Ukraine, you might experience rolling outages, which means that you might be cycling this battery every day, so you want a battery that's designed for that. You want to make sure that whatever battery you get is rated for deep cycling. So there are deep discharge lead acid batteries, and I think these are the sweet spot. They should last you about 5 winters. You can get lithium batteries that will last you a lifetime, you know, the 12-volt LFP batteries, but I think that's too much money in this case. And the car batteries are the cheapest, which is why I chose a car battery, but again, you shouldn't choose a car battery if you expect deep discharge. So there you go, oil and gas heating done off-grid in an emergency. Practically speaking, mostly oil. In the next and final video, I'm going to talk about solar panels, and you'll notice that I left them for last because despite being seemingly the most popular normie take on an energy crisis, I think that they have serious limitations in the particular type of crisis that Ukraine is facing. Nevertheless, I do think they have a place in this crisis, especially if it persists beyond the winter, and my little strategy that I'm constructing here cannot be completed without them. Thank you for watching, I'll see you in part 3. Like and subscribe.